follows an extract from my book Fête Fatale, available from Amazon. Chapter 16, Part 1. Wainwright and Maddox stood up to leave, and James walked down the driveway in his stockinged feet as they walked to their cars. "We'll keep each other posted," said James. "Thank you for giving up your free morning, Wainwright. I'm grateful for your input." Wainwright nodded his acknowledgement and drove off, waving his arm out of the window as he went. "Should I pull him over for careless driving?" said Maddox. "You can see he's only got one hand on the wheel." James laughed out loud. He liked Maddox. They'd spent the last hour and a half submerged in the seedier side of humanity, and Maddox could do a good job and yet keep it all at arm's length. He could quickly revert back to the cheery village PC. It was a safety valve, and it was good for them all. Nevertheless, they had a job to do, and so James returned once more to the task in hand. "We need to go right back to the day of the fête. We don't know what time frame we're looking at, and so we're searching in the dark, but at least we now know that we do need to be searching. I need to be sure that we can place exactly where everyone was throughout that day and what they were doing. I don't know what I hope we'll achieve, but we've got to start somewhere. You're the local lad, so you're the man for this job. Do your thing and chat to people. People clam up when I ask them questions. That's one of the drawbacks of promotion." "I'm sure you manage somehow, sir," said Maddox. James gave him a wry smile. "I'll see what I can find out from Beth and Drew. A lot of water has gone under the bridge since then, but I don't know that we're so badly off. Because the fête was held that day, it fixes it in people's minds. We'll get a full toxicology report in soon, and that will spearhead our inquiries. In the meantime, make the best start that you can here." Back inside the house, Beth and Drew cleared away the mugs and plates as they waited for Benji to come back. They knew that the official meeting, such as it was, had ended, but they guessed that there was more to say to each other privately. "Do you need to head straight back home, or would you like to stay for lunch?" asked Beth. "I'm in no rush to get home. Lexi knew that I was coming here, and so she's made plans for the day," said Benedict. "Why don't you two go and relax for half an hour, and I'll get lunch ready. I know that there's lots still to discuss, but it can wait until after we've eaten," said Beth. She was finding that the occasional bouts of insomnia that she suffered from could be turned to profitable use, and she knew that Noodle would be happy to join her in a snooze later that day if she needed it. In the small hours of that morning, instead of tossing and turning in bed, she'd put a gammon joint into the slow cooker with a litre of fizzy cola. There was a tray of cooked potato wedges left over from yesterday, which she crushed with the bottom of a heavy saucepan before frying them in a seasoned cast-iron pan. Although there were eggs in the storage rack, Beth bought fresh eggs from the hen house, as she knew how much Benji really loved new eggs. One was still warm, and you couldn't get fresher than that. Once the peas had finished boiling, she banged on the service bell to call the men to lunch. During lunch, they restricted the topics of conversation to catching up on family news and general village gossip. Beth described the troubles that she'd heard that Toby was having at school. "You can't help but wonder what Henrietta has had to live through. She carries an aura of dignified suffering," said Benji. "There's a sad tale to tell there, I'm sure. I can't help but notice that our young Sergeant Maddox thinks quite a lot of that girl. Who wouldn't? I gather that he's got his own fair share of admirers, but I think that he's only got eyes for Henrietta. A few weeks ago I'd have said that he was wasting his time, but I do believe that she's thawing a little. I can imagine that he'd be good with the laddie too. The big question is whether or not she's already spoken for. I think that he's wise enough to be patient and find out gradually what the score is. He won't force his hand and waste his chance. Good luck to him." When the meal was finished, they carried their coffee through to the lounge. Benji lounged on the sofa, and Noodle nestled into the crook of his long legs, with just the tip of his nose peeping from under a knee. Absent-mindedly stroking the dog, he opened the proceedings. "Well, like Miss Marple, we've left the unsavoury topic of murder until we've finished eating, but I think that we can speak freely between ourselves. If we just talk off the top of our heads, it doesn't matter if we're mighty wide of the mark. We're amongst friends. OK, you set the tone, Benedict. Tell us freely what your suspicions are, not what you have evidence for or what seems logical. What do you really think? Said Drew. It sounds crass, but it usually is the most obvious suspect who really is guilty, and that means Jean. The means and the motive are both there, and people have killed for far less than she's gained from John's death, said Benedict. Do you still think that now that more information has come to light? Asked Beth. I've not entirely given her up, but I'll agree that my enthusiasm for her as prime suspect is waning, said Benedict. Is that because of the sudden appearance of all these foreign heavies? Asked Drew. To a point, yes. I have to admit that it all has something of a phony flavour to it. It just seems so unreal when you connect it to this little village and John Barlow. I still think that this case has a local flavour to it, and not only because of Betty's missing heart tablets. I'm adamant that poison isn't the mafia's weapon of choice, said Benedict. There is another link between the deaths of Betty and John, though, isn't there? Don't forget that it was Betty who found John's body. If somebody had killed him at the fete, they'd know that the body would soon be found, but maybe she found him before the stage was quite set. What if she saw something and the scene changed by the time she brought Dr. Wainwright to the picture? She mightn't realise it straight away, but if she did, she'd need silencing, said Beth. You've got a point there. However, that again implies that the murderer is a local here. How else would anybody know that Betty had seen something, or the foreign heavies had an envoy in your midst, said Benji. Strangers stand out a mile in this village. There were plenty of visitors on the day of the fete, but if they'd hung around after then, the whole village would be alive to the fact, said Drew. Of course, there's always Conrad Jefferson, said James. He's my best shot at present. He's local, he met John on the day that he died, and he's a big noise in the property market. He could easily fit into their gangster world. You're not telling me that that massive house was bought by entirely honest measures, said Benedict. Oh, Benji, I've just made good friends with Hyacinth. She's so lovely. This will tear her apart. Conrad himself seemed a genuinely nice guy too. Oh, Beth stopped suddenly and passed her hand over her face. Did you mention that these godfathers of the night also operated in America? Yes, that's right, New York, I think, said Benedict. I'm sure that Hyacinth said that their son is a big shot in America. He took a branch of Conrad's business over there, and then it grew and flourished into a mighty oak from what she was telling me. Apparently, he's expanded into other forms of business, but Hyacinth didn't really know much about it specifically. She was really proud of him and told me all about the business giants that he now mixed with and what fantastic contacts he'd made. It would look impressive on the surface though, wouldn't it? It could even be that it was the son who got the dad involved rather than the other way around, said Beth. That's rather interesting. Do you know his name, Beth? Asked Benji. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I don't. I could find out though, said Beth. His name is Quentin, said Drew. There's something else, which is rather an odd coincidence. I'm pretty sure that Conrad told me that Quentin has a girlfriend he's been going steady with for some time now. I've an idea he said that she was Greek. Her family still live in Greece, but she's moved to America to manage their business interests there, like Quentin did for Conrad. I gather they met at a business networking function, one of these monthly business breakfast meetings, but so far up the social ladder that we couldn't see it for clouds. There's an awful lot of overlapping coincidence occurring within the Jefferson family at the moment, isn't there? Said Benedict. They definitely warrant a closer look. I'll let Maddox conduct the first round, but I think I'm going to have to step in sooner or later. Are you seriously suggesting that John Barlow became willingly entangled with some mafia group and then did something which warranted him being got out of the way? Do you think that Jefferson had to do the dirty work for these people? Asked Beth. It's not a matter of what I personally think here. It's to do with where the facts are leading us. The case could well be that John didn't willingly get involved, or maybe he got cold feet and changed his mind. I'm afraid the pieces fit rather too well to be safely ignored, despite the fact that it sounds ludicrous, said Benedict. If John took the bait in his vulnerable state and then became privy to goodness knows what, they'd hardly let him just walk away, would they? But didn't you say that poison simply wasn't their style? I did, but I've been thinking about that. Their signature method would be to make a particularly nasty example of a recalcitrant member to warn others not to be tempted to act likewise. However, let's face it, who is there in Mossleigh to set an example to, said Benedict. Conrad Jefferson, maybe, said Drew. Accepting that he is involved, he'd be the ambassador, not a lackey at the bottom that might need teaching a lesson. I suspect that John was an embarrassing mistake who needed to be quietly let slip away, said Benedict. He really was out of his depth, wasn't he, said Beth. He tried to play with the big boys, and when he didn't like it, well, it was too late. I still can't take it in. It does take a good stretch of the imagination, I'll grant you. We did say that we'd let our fantasy roam. It may still be nothing more than our imaginations running wild, but at present I have no better alternative. Something might turn up which will lead us in a completely different direction. Who can tell? Said Benji. An alarming percentage of our success rate is due to chance and happenstance. All we can do is hope that something presents itself. Beth gave a tremendous yawn. Like you said, Benji, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Let's hope that something else crops up. Beth's really tired. She didn't sleep well last night, said Drew. I want to shake off all of this talk of murder. It's making me feel grimy. Shall we take a walk to the Badger, Benji? A walk in the sunshine and a pint of Cheshire set will go a good way to restoring my faith in humanity. We can leave Beth and Noodle to a bit of peace and quiet. For the full book of Fête Fatale, available in paperback or as an ebook, follow the link in the cards in the description box or find details on my website at sharonbill.com. Thanks for listening.